Cindy Deschenes, Indigenous My name is Cindy Deschenes. I am from Kitigan-Zibi and Kitigan, Quebec. That's Garden River is what it's called, and the place of the garden. Those are my two communities. I'm Algonquin. I've been here in Saskatoon for the last 3 years, and I think that I want to say thank you for inviting me to come and talk about stories. Myself, I was raised in a traditional way as a hunter. I was raised on the land. I was raised with my family taking me out on the land. Our community was only 300 people. We had a school that went up to grade 5. And it's in the middle of a provincial park, so we didn't see the outside world too much. So we were pretty isolated where I came from. Growing up there, it had its benefits, but it also had some drawbacks. I didn't watch movies, I didn't get to go to the theater, I didn't get to do any of those things. A big part of my life, though, was stories. We had seasonal stories. We had stories that were told in the winter time. We had stories that were told in the summer. What I know of stories is that stories were used for entertainment. A big part of it was to entertain us. Stories were also used for the purpose of discipline. So, for example, when I was a bad kid, I was told stories by my grandmother, and we called her Coop. And so I was bad a lot, which wasn't good because I got a lot of stories. And sometimes the stories, I had to sit there because you respect your elders. And I was made to sit for sometimes 3-4 hours to listen to a story. So stories also had a purpose to teach. So one was to discipline, the other was for entertainment, but a big part of it was also to teach. I remember one day in my community, there were a lot of us kids. We were probably about 8 or 9 years old, and we caught a spider, and we were pulling off its legs, and we thought it was funny. And my kukum came, and she saw us, and she saw me, and I was her granddaughter, and she was very, very, very upset at me. And she started scolding all of us, but then afterwards, I had to go up the hill and sit in the house at the table, and she made tea. And I remember sitting there, and she started to tell me stories about the spider. And she started to tell me the stories about the fact that spiders are our relatives, that we're all connected as human beings and animals, the plant world, all of those things. And as she was telling me the story about the spider, the purpose of her telling me was for me to understand that spiders also had a purpose on Earth, that they also had a sense of belonging. One of the things I think is that every culture, every group of people, we live and we adapt. And I think that how we adapt is to our surrounding, our situation, our circumstances. For us, for example, as Algonquin, we had oral stories, but we also had belts. We had these long belts that we used for teaching, but we also used what we called the birch bark scrolls. And we would take birch bark and we would draw our stories on it. I know the Blackfoot, they used a buffalo hide, and they would draw their stories on it, and people could read that story just by looking at the pictures, right? And they would share the oral story. But now, you have this technology, and I think that that's how our cultures, a lot of our cultures are starting to adapt, is finding ways that we can tell our traditional stories for our future generations. I know that, for example, the Blackfoot, them too, when you go to their museum in Siksika, they have a cultural center there, and it's a beautiful center. But they use this kind of technology to share the story about why the dogs sniff each other's bum. They sniff each other's bottoms, and there's a story about why that is, and it's a Blackfoot story. But they have it recorded in this way, and you hear the voice of the elders speaking. So again, I think it has to do with cultures adapt to survive, and I think we're very smart at finding ways to help our traditions, our stories, our knowledge, our wisdom, our teachings to be passed on. Yeah. So good job, guys. Good job, youth.